There is a place, not here or there, but somewhere in between. There is a space in the thin air that really can be seen. If you listen and observe, you may be surprised. Some may call it Camelot or even paradise. Some may say you cross a bridge, others through a door. But all I know about this place is that I call it evermore. Evermore. Good evening, sweet spirits. Welcome to the show. My name is Suzanne Sorrell, and I'm the producer and host of the Evermore Paranormal Network. On this episode, we're doing something special. It's called a Ghost-A-Thon. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Beackley, and I am the owner and founder of Ghost Under Investigation. I'm also a psychic. I also have a radio show. I'm the producer of it, and I'm joined here today with my colleague, Melissa Leeper.
My name is Melissa Leeper. I've been a paranormal investigator for 20 years in the network, focusing mainly on demonology, but I'm also a psychic counselor.
And we'll be talking about images and voices in my head. Americans seem to claim that they see ghosts. 1 in 5 people in the population actually claim this. 15 to 28% claim to hear audio or some kind of disembodied voice in the population. That's basically saying 3/4 of the population is either seeing or hearing something. Now, when you get into the hearing and seeing things, it can tend to go into a diagnosis. And I would say this is why people don't like to go to a psychologist, because they're in fear of being diagnosed as schizophrenia.
Right. Schizophrenia, I will say, through there have been hundreds of cases that I've done over the years, and I focus mainly on adolescents and children. If children are involved, I'm likely going to take the case because they take priority. And, you know, let's face it, when they finally get the courage enough to tell their parents that they're hearing voices in their head telling them to do things, or that they're seeing apparitions or spirits of, human spirit, the first thing that comes to mind is we gotta get them to a doctor. This is a mental disorder. And then, then there's the fear of medications that come after a diagnosis. And it's not to say that this is not something that truly is necessary for some people. There are several strains of disorder, autoimmune deficiencies in a wide spectrum. And it's still a study in psychology. So
there's 5 different subtypes of schizophrenia, and the schizoaffective disorder basically has your hallucinations, delusions, and it also has your mania and depression. When you have an oppression going on, those moods, your moods tend to swing, and depression kicks in and all these things are occurring that can actually mock this disease.
Well, I think what Sabrina's conveying here is a paranormal experience compared to a medical diagnosis.
Right.
Because in oppression, you're talking about the darker side of the paranormal, delving into demonology, where the voices the people are hearing and the visions that they are experiencing become a fear factor, and then this becomes more of an issue, and this oppression is a pattern of a mental deterioration leading to a physical deterioration and into terrible elements we don't like to have to ever witness in the paranormal. So then it becomes a situation where we have to get to know more about the visions and the entities by a repetition pattern. Just like the diagnoses are a repetition and pattern by experiencing the same types of,
Even so, those who claim psychism can be diagnosed the same.
Well, that's true. Well, of course, because let's face it, if you're hearing voices, the first thing you're going to think is, I am losing my mind.
Yeah.
Now, some people go, throughout their entire lives before they're able to really rationalize like an adult. So this causes a separation between, a 5-year-old and most adults around them. They begin to see that, okay, they don't understand because they can't hear this, they can't see this.
Or it's an imaginary friend.
I have to keep it from them now. And that becomes just an imaginary friend. No, that's very common in every other household.
Absolutely.
Everywhere.
So, yeah, cases that I have taken, and along with Melissa, I have come across a lot of cases where people are absolutely afraid to go to a psychologist. But the problem with some hauntings is it's the chaos that it brings. And the idea is to stop the chaos in the house, to stop the activity.
Well, that's just the thing. When we have a situation where the voices in our head become audible to others, and now we have a disembodied voice that now other people are hearing, then you have proof of this phenomenon occurring in the house. And once that happens, then we have a different situation. That's usually when we get a call to come in with some of our, tech experts, and it's more like a ghost hunter scene, like the things that you see on TV, where they bring in the equipment and we try to record these things, to investigate on our own to see if we can decipher the same. So then the fear factor usually rises, but there's some clarification to be able to verify that, okay, maybe I'm not crazy, maybe something is really happening here. But that isn't what happens for a lot of people. Many people, especially young people who have some type of sensory perception disorder, they are not able to rationalize these things in their minds. So, and then since they already have the disorder, it just gets medicated. But then when the medications don't react to the medications, then a lot of times they'll just tack on another diagnosis, and it just goes on and on from here. And sometimes these things have a domino effect with other people. Hypothetically, a 5-year-old with a sensory perception disorder, family member, another 5-year-old, 6-year-old comes into the house, soon after this, they go home and they start experiencing the same things in their house. Now we have a domino effect. Now we have a connection between the two.
Right.
And then it seems more like, a genetic issue, a family issue. Then we have to look into other paranormal reasons for this stuff to be occurring. And then it gets very confusing. And this can be a long process. Some of the cases that I have with this type of situation, I've had for 10 plus years. These 8-year-olds are now
Yes.
18.
I've had
now
a case
they
for
have
almost
their own
20
children,
years.
and it's on and on.
Yeah, when you get involved in the cases, it's not something you just go in and you clear up and overnight type thing. These cases go on for years and years. We become the counselor.
Right.
We become, the guidance to the families and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, people that reach out for help, whether it's through, psychologists now today are more out to believe in the paranormal and actually take the moment and listen to what is going on to clue off on whether it's something mental illness or it's something more or it's, that type of thing. Yeah.
I think that a lot of the psychology professionals in post-traumatic stress disorder therapists and even addiction therapists are a lot more open-minded today than they were 20 years ago when it comes to paranormal issues or supernatural issues, maybe in part from mainstream attention,
Right.
TV attention. It's more mainstream now. It's much more common. There's a better understanding of it.
What I find actually interesting is 3% of the population, well, under 3% of the population has this diagnosis of schizophrenia. But yet you have almost 75% of the American population claiming they're hearing and seeing things. So there's only a tiny fraction of people that are actually diagnosed with this disorder, though it can be compared to it and not actually be that.
Right. There are other scientific reasons. Now, I don't claim to be a scientist by any means, but,
No.
I think that most people can say that they've experienced that sensation of falling asleep and catching yourself. We have these types of episodes where we hear loud, audible voices in our ears upon waking. And that's a very common thing. I think everybody has experienced that at least once or twice in their
And that
lifetime.
could go in with sleep paralysis.
Yeah, and then we get into some people, it escalates into a sleep paralysis type of situation. And then, sometimes an entity situation, like
Yes.
old hag syndrome. You can look that up. It's one of the most common of
Being held down.
supernatural
breathe.
explanations,
But what happens when you're wide awake and you're not sleeping? You're not, it's the middle of the day and suddenly you just hear your name being called or something talking in your ear or, you see something across the room from you. So you can't associate that.
Well, I think it definitely differs for people who have always been privy to seeing things or hearing voices or communicating in some capacity with things that they cannot see. And these type of people, they just are, they're desensitized. They don't have that fear issue that people who maybe had a near-death experience and then suddenly, they start hearing voices or they start seeing things. And I think that the most common denominator there is people believe that they have had a brush with death, and since that occurred, well, now since they were that close to it, it can actually speak to them in some capacity.
Right.
And that is harder for people to start experiencing that type of thing later in life. Because, even in an adult rational mind, if you lived your entire life with never experiencing something like that, well, it's will blow your mind. And then they start seeking people in the paranormal network, which is much easier these days to do than it used to be.
Right.
And therein lies another big can of worms.
Yeah, you kind of got to watch who you talk to and make sure they're reputable groups. That's important.
It's hard.
And
People
they
don't know what a reputable group is when they're just coming in looking for that type of help. So that's another issue. And then it just goes on and on.
Well, I kind of look at it as if you're going to call a group in, make sure that they know what they're doing and they are able to get the contacts or have people, say if it is a real bad situation, to be able to come in and help.
There's really...
Versus a new group saying...
Right. It's hard to convey this type of information to somebody who is new to looking for help in this obscure area.
Yeah.
It's a gray zone, of reality. So it's very difficult. And I think that, like you mentioned earlier, with people being more open-minded in the professional fields, there are, if you would, here's something, for instance, if you would contact some group, say a well-organized group, like some ufology group. Don't go, if you're seeing, aliens or experiencing something to that effect, if you're an abductee or if you're having, sleep disorders in this capacity, you look into a UFO society. When you do that, you're going to be looking for the eldest in the group, the founders of that group. How long has this group been in existence? 20 years, 30 years, that's great.
How reputable.
And find out if they do have therapists that work within this organization. Because if they do, then you're going to get the kind of answers that you're really seeking. I mean, from mainstream media, people immediately want to, bring in the machines and let's record this and let's record that. And like you said, if people are not reputable, if they haven't really put the legwork in and they haven't been doing this for at least 10 years, then, and also it's important to look, if you're going to look for a group and not an organization, it's best to find one that specializes in residential cases. It deals with families on a personal level and not just a technical level.
Another thing I find important with the cases is checking medications and diagnosis and things like that, because certain medications can also cause hallucinations, delusions, and what have you. And you might not have a paranormal case, but maybe a medicine change.
Well, that's common sense, and that's the type of thing that, a group founder should instruct their people to do. That's a very important thing. It's one of the hardest questions that you have to ask, but it's something that you have to know.
And people do get offended, like, oh, you're thinking I'm crazy. No, we're not thinking you're crazy. We have to rule this stuff out.
Yeah, you do. But once that comes into play, and then you have the question of why are you on, an antidepressant, or what is the diagnosis? How long? What was the,
Right.
And
I mean, by no means, I'm saying, just because you're taking medication or you have a diagnosis that paranormal happenings cannot happen, because they can.
Sure.
So not ruling that out. It's just nice to know these things.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times, obviously these diagnoses and the medications comes into play after a long period of experiencing these types of things around people who would maybe find it an embarrassment or wouldn't want to go to their church if they were a churchgoer because it's not, privy to what they teach, or it goes against what they preach. So a lot of people don't want to admit it. And that can be a real issue too.
Churches are sticky nowadays, I think, when it comes to the paranormal to begin with. It's hard to find churches that'll come out and help. You have to go through channels, really.
I think that they would like to, and I think that a lot of them are more knowledgeable about it too. I mean, it's easier to just say, don't acknowledge it and sweep it under the rug and it'll go away because,
Right.
You'll grow out of it. Well, sometimes that's true.
Right.
Sometimes we don't forget these experiences, and then, they're going to come back and haunt us later on in life. For a lot of people, that's the way it goes.
Or people that just go through childhood on into adulthood, and it just follows. They see, they hear.
That's true. I mean, the psychic networks are a dime a dozen anymore. Remember when it used to be an 800 number you could call on the phone,
Right.
and get a psychic and pay a whole bunch of money, and that was the thing to do. Then people became appeased. They, it warmed their heart to believe that they were actually, communicating with someone that had passed on, and that can become a real racket too, which it did. And it still is. So, and it can be very dangerous too, because I think in today's world, as mainstream as it all is now, there's more room for wickedness. There's more room for trickery. There's more room for things to just go terribly wrong. And they sometimes do. Especially with psychics, new psychics coming in, psychic networks, people, so many different descriptions. Nowadays, we could have our own dictionary.
Oh, absolutely.
With all the different terms.
But understanding what each person is different. It's not, when you go and seek out a psychic, you should really know what they actually can do, versus somebody that can just read cards. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm more of an aura reader versus the downright readings, though I do readings. You're sitting there shaking your head.
I've seen some things.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I brought this up in one of my lectures last year about how dangerous it can be for a medium, a psychic medium, to get involved in the paranormal, because they're thinking, well, I can see this and I'm going to be a conduit for this.
We're very vulnerable
Yes,
when we
you are
walk
very
into
vulnerable.
it. Yeah, very vulnerable, because we're like the lighthouse. Ooh, they
Right.
automatically know we're coming. They know we can hear, we can see, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, we're the target when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Wow.
And then we get into the
I didn't ask for it.
right the deeper subject of spiritual attachment.
Yes, that can happen. I mean, information has to come from somewhere, to be honest. I mean, you don't just wake up one day and decide, oh, well, I'm psychic.
Some do.
Well, some do. It goes from childhood on up. Yeah, definitely. You could be born that way, I suppose.
Well, there are many workshops nowadays that you can take and become a psychic, or,
Wow.
a deliverance minister, or anything you want to be.
Okay.
It's out there. You can do it.
Absolutely. If you want to.
$50 on the internet.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay for being a psychic. I don't even make people pay me for readings, let alone doing. Yeah.
Well,
Well, thank you for allowing us to come on Ghost-A-Thon. What else?
You can find me as Melissa Leeper on Facebook, or you can also find our Universal Psychic Center on Facebook.
Sabrina Beackley, Facebook.
So thank you for watching the Evermore Paranormal Network. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ghost-A-Thon. Until next time, just remember, life goes on. So in the end, what have I said is only that I'm sure. For all I know about this place is that I call it evermore.